In this video, we're going to learn how to mask photos over text in Affinity Photo. It's a very easy concept to grasp. There are a few things to note when we do begin, which I'll jump into shortly, but here I'm just showing more or less a final piece that I rendered before recording this. The one we create in this video may be a little different, but we're going to go about the same process and use the same photography to make this effect. We'll be using different typefaces throughout, of course, so you might do the same just to experiment on your end. If you have the files, of course, go ahead and subscribe to be a pro member to download these files. You can find those in the below the video section of the page you're probably viewing this on. But other than that, we'll jump right in. I've sourced a few photos to begin with, which will be in that assets folder that you download. We will go ahead and start with this file. I probably won't include this file with you because I want you to use your own typefaces, because I don't exactly own the rights to some of these typefaces, which are pretty popular ones like Gotham here or MetaPro and Avenir, but they're just some of my favorites I like to use in many designs. So I've got the text laid out on a canvas here. It's a fairly large canvas just to convey what we're going to do. But I'm going to align these centered and just drag them to where they're more or less centered on the page. I'll probably turn on snapping here so it guides me. And with that done, I'll probably go ahead and start with the fire. And the first thing I want to do actually is maybe scale this up a tad. And you can either do that by actually typing in the font size, 430 points maybe, and just going from there. And to really get the mask effect over any type of text, unfortunately the text needs to be rendered as curves. So in Affinity Photo, you can convert to curves by right-clicking and hitting Convert Curves, and convert to curves here. That will create 4 shapes in this case, because fire is spelled with 4 letters, so they aren't quite one shape yet, and to really make this work we need them to be. So I'm going to go ahead and select all 4 of those and come up to, well, I actually need to adjust my toolbar here, so let me do that real quick. There is a geometry board that I'd like to add to that, and this is going to be able to make this one shape by clicking this add button here. As you see, there's different options here you can do. Maybe experiment with those on your own time, but for this video I'm going to use the add version, and you'll notice it converts itself to one layer now, so it's just one fire layer, so we can name that fire. Alright, so that's the main step 1. The next step is just to import the photography, which we'll do very shortly. I'm going to make a boundary box here first, just to kind of segment this section, and maybe we'll make it black. Just pick that color, and I'll move it to the back by hitting Command left bracket on my keyboard. And our text is black too, so we can't see it quite yet, but we can go ahead and just make it white for now. Your color of your text won't really matter unless you move or toy with opacity, so that's something to take into account once we get the photo masked over this. So let's go ahead and import a photo. I'll do a place. You can drag or drop a photo into your document too. It's up to you how you want to do it. Grab the one that's included here. I've found these on unsplash.com, so the actual owner is on the actual photo name itself. I'm giving them credit for that. Position it kind of centered over that text. Maybe we can just move it behind even to give us context. And I want the flames to sort of go through halfway point of the text. So what we can do from there is on the layer above, I want this photo to mask it. And to do that correctly, we need to shove it right below it. And you'll notice it masks itself accordingly. So that's perfect. And we can move it around. It kind of maintains the masking, but you can still adjust it in this way. So we have that set up. Part of the F is in black though, so I kind of want it to appear more prominent because of the dark background. So what we can do there is add a stroke to our text, which is now a shape, I should say. Keep it on grays and add a stroke. It's got 1 point, which isn't much for this one. We're going to probably add a little bit more. And we'll probably roll with that. I think that looks okay. So if you want to decrease that contrast, you can maybe decrease the opacity on that stroke if you want. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as is because I think it looks okay. But to enhance this a little bit more, since this is just a flat background, maybe I'll import that fire image again. And we'll toy with some blur effects with this one. So I'm going to just kind of span the whole document, maybe make it a little larger and center it below like this. And you can leave it like that and it looks pretty good. We could even add some shadow on the text by going to the effects panel, hitting some outer shadow. And by default, you won't see anything, but if you go ahead and move this dial and then increase the radius, you should start to see some shadow come into picture. You might need to increase the intensity and offset too. And opacity quite a bit more actually. So something like that to begin with. First version I did, I have it kind of blurred, which it's looking back, it's a little too much. First mask this to that square below. So it's just only in that rectangle now. We select this and it's just masked to that, which is great. And then you can even lock the children in that if you want to. So then you can move that box around and the thing stays still. But let's go ahead and toy with that background image. Maybe add a blur filter on it so we can go up to layer, new adjustment, or live adjustment layer, excuse me, and maybe a Gaussian blur. And I only want to add just a touch of this, just so it's almost like it's further in the background, but not quite the focus, since the fire text is what we want to be the focus. So sort of like that. And a nice thing about this filter is that it creates a mask. So if you wanted to create more depth, you can even go back and brush some of that mask out using a dark color. So maybe towards the center part, it's a little more focused as opposed to the other parts. So I think that one is clearly demonstrating what's going on here. The next one we'll start with is water. And I'll probably just grab this rectangle and duplicate it. So Command C, Command V, you can do it just like that. And I'll send it to the back and go ahead and move it up in the layer panel. I'm going to go and group everything that was the fire art and create one global group for it. So select those layers, group that, and we'll just rename it fire to keep track of that. And save it. Okay, so with the water section, we have our text, it's black as well. And I used a different font for this one just for the sake of using a different font. You can continue to use the same one if you have a favorite, whichever you prefer. So again, we'll repeat the process of creating curves out of this text. And the easiest way I've found is just to right click and hit convert to curves. And you'll notice it does the same thing where we have each of the shapes now separate, but we want those to be one. So I'll do again, create this add effect on this path, and now it's one shape. So great. So included in the files again is a water image, which you can find there, and then we'll actually paste this in just like we did the first one. And this is going to have kind of a desaturated feel, and this image will probably need to be scaled pretty heavily, but for the sake of getting it in place, I want to scale it a little bit down. Kind of want the water level to be halfway between the text so you can see where it ends and begins. So let's start there, and then we'll do it the same way and create the mask on that layer. Just drag it below, and there we go. So I think that looks okay as is. We might toy with that effect a little bit more, maybe shrink it down and just have a little more of the water across the halfway point of the actual letters. Let's add the same way we did before, just place that image again as the background. And it will need to scale to fit this document, so you can go pretty large when you place it. something like this. Maybe I'll zoom out a little. And we have that rectangle below, so we'll mask to it just like we did before. And you'll notice the desaturation really makes this kind of hard to see, so we can either keep it as is or even adjust the saturation with a filter of some sort. So an HSL would be a good one, I think, to use here. And you can pick a color and just increase the saturation a bit. And this is going to affect the whole document, so we need to definitely mask this below. Maybe group these, and then we'll do that. There we go. You make a little more blue. Something like that, I think, looks okay. We still need to emphasize the water text though, so let's go and adjust some effects on it. Use an outer shadow again. Ramp up that opacity and radius. And using black here probably isn't the best color since we have blue pretty much throughout, so you might pick the photo. Just the blue in the photo is where I kind of start, and then select it and then just toy around with a darker color just so it blends in just a tad bit better. And probably want to increase the intensity and radius like so. We could use anything, well, maybe we could add a stroke to this as well. But maybe it will be a darker stroke, perhaps. So let's do a color, maybe more of a blue tone. Just kind of feeling it out here, and then let's increase the weight for sure, or the width. That color's a little too blue. Do the same kind of technique we did before. I think a darker color here might make more sense. Just slightly darker. And then to maybe enhance this a little more, we can make the background image have some sort of like overlaid color. So I'm going to create a shape over top, and it's going to mask to this as well. But I want to create a darker tone in the foreground color. And then toy with the opacity possibly, and then even the blend mode, just to kind of make this a little different than the text overlaying it, because it's at the moment it's a little too like it, and it just looks a little off. So let's toy with this a bit. Maybe we could just do a normal filter, but then bring down the opacity some. Maybe adjust that color, it's a little dull. I'm not liking this. Let's go into our HSL adjustment again. Maybe pick a different color. Maybe something like that. It's still desaturated, but it has that effect of like a real clear water, if you ask me. So I think I like that though. And then to enhance this text one more shade further, we could add an inner shadow. It's a little technique I like to do that kind of makes a little highlight on the text. If you go increase the opacity and make it a white color, and then increase the radius a bit, and we'll see where this offset ends up. It's kind of at the bottom right now. I want it at the top though. So what that did is adds this little light touch of shadow, but it's white at the very top, and it kind of makes the text gleamy, more or less reflective, I guess is the best way to describe it. So that's kind of what is after there. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I'm going to go ahead and group this. Looks like it already is, so great. So let's just name it water. And the next one we'll do is grass. Go ahead and do the same process real quick. Okay, so with this layer we need, I'm going to first make the text white so we can see what's going on there. Great. I used two images for this one. So one is for the background image that's more or less just as is, and the other is for the actual text image, just to show differences as opposed to using effects. So I'm going to start by placing our background image, which is going to be this one, and just making it masked to our rectangle we've been using as the pattern throughout. So I'll throw that below that grass box, And it looks like we don't even need, got one too many layers here. So that's going to go below this black rectangle here. Great. And overlying that, I might increase this text just a smidge. So this text has already been converted to curves, and we've made it an entire shape. It's on its own. So that's step one. And the second step we just did, which was to add this background image, which is going to set the tone. And then lastly, I want to add one more image that is what we actually mask the text to. So I'll do that with this one. It's kind of more of a pattern looking image. It's just a lot of grass basically. So I'll do the same masking technique there, and you'll notice it really blends in hard. So we're gonna have to offset that with some shadows, of course, and maybe some different filters. So I'm gonna first start with some effects on the layer itself. We'll go ahead and create an outer shadow, and I'm gonna just kind of do the same pattern I've done here. We want to maybe go 270 with that. I want the radius to be pretty large, and I want the color to be more of the darker green, so I can pick maybe a darker shade in the photo in the background just to kind of mimic that, or just go into the green area here and kind of pick a darker one. Maybe add some noise even. Okay, we can go one step further and add a small gradient overlay, and this seems counterintuitive. If we do it correctly, we should be able to just use it as a means to create kind of a glared effect on the text. So I'm gonna omit the black shade, just basically bring down the opacity on this handle all the way. And I'm gonna make the angle vertical, so 90 degrees. And then bring down the opacity overall just a touch on the text, maybe to like 50%. And you can use a blend mode here if you want, like maybe overlay, kind of adds a little sharper tone to it that's not so obvious. And we can scale the X and Y values if you really want to. I think we're gonna leave it as is though. I think that looks okay. It's just a subtle effect, nothing too crazy here. Save it. And I want to add a stroke as well. So let's go to colors. I'm going to pick a color and use that. And I like to use the color HSL color wheel. And we'll pick that. We definitely need a larger than 1 point stroke. And this should probably be more of a greenish, lighter tone green color. Let's just kind of toy with this a bit. And if you were to really want to make this dynamic, you can go into making a gradient out of the stroke itself. So if you switch the context here to stroke at the very top, we'll go ahead and make a linear gradient, and you'll get these handles out of it. So we can adjust those accordingly. So you'll want to do that first and then toy with the colors. So since we have that lighter shade on the top, that gradient overlay we added, I kind of want to keep that trend going with stroke as well. So we've got something going on here I think I like. So let's maybe make the bottom a little darker and the top a little lighter. And it could even be not so obvious of a angle for the gradient if you don't want 90 degrees, but I think it's looking okay. The photo in the background we can adjust to just to be a little darker so the text on top stands out a little bit more. So you can do that just by adding, let's say, levels just above it. Kind of increase the blacks and whites. And I always like to add curves. More of just a very subtle S curve. It's kind of really enhance the photo behind it. And we could do the same for the grass text as well. So maybe I'll do that. Oops. Start with curves on this one. So let's see, the stroke is not quite to my liking. I think I want it to be a little less obvious. And I think we need more shadow on the text itself. So I'm going to add a little bit more, maybe make it the color a tad darker. So I think that wraps that up, guys. We've got 3 different takes on masking text with photos, and as you can see, it's kind of just a repeatable process. You can more or less take text of your favorite font and convert it to curves, and then later mask a photo over top, as well as adding effects to that text-based layer later to really enhance it, as we've done with each here. So hopefully this helped you. If you want to share your own work, feel free to go ahead and post it below in the comments, and I look forward to seeing your feedback.